everyone. We're going to read the next section of Ratscalibur by Josh Lieb. This is for the Gilbert Library's winter reading. When we're done with this, if you want to come check it out and read it for yourself, you can come in and do that. Okay, here we go. Chapter 25. It was late afternoon when they got to Squirrel's Oak. The progress was slow. The rats walked alongside their tired cats instead of riding them, except for the sleeping Princess Yasleen, who was strapped onto Questel's back. Everyone seemed to be limping or dragging, but no one complained. Joey kept an eye out for sewer rats, even though he knew that if they decided to attack again, well, there wasn't much Joey or his friends could do. He'd try to sniff for them to get a location, but it was like his nose ran up against a wall. Hopefully they had gone back underground. Just when Joey didn't think he could walk another step, they reached a clearing. In the center stood an oak tree. It was ancient and enormous, tall and black, with long, twisted branches that reached out from its trunk like greedy fingers. "See there?" said Percifer, pointing to a hole about halfway up the tree. "That's the entrance to Squirrel's lair." "How will we get up there?" asked Joey. Percifer winked. "You'll see." Brutilda climbed up on Questel, untied the princess, and then jumped down, carrying Yasleen on her back. The princess was sleeping so deeply that she didn't even stop snoring. Percifer approached a fat brown squirrel that sat gnawing on a walnut at the foot of the tree. "Greetings, Squire Jellybelly," said Percifer. The squirrel didn't look up or anything, just sank his teeth into the walnut and spat when the insides turned out to be rotten. Percifer didn't look insulted. "Mind your mounts, O greedy guts, while we confer with your master. They need food, water, and cow's milk if you have it." The squirrel didn't even nod. He just stood unhappily, grabbed the reins of the cats, and led them around the back of the tree. He must be Squirrel's stable boy, thought Joey. Then Percifer looked up to the hole in the tree, so far above their heads that Joey could barely see it, and whistled, long, high, and piercing. There was no response. He whistled again. Finally, a voice as dry and crackly as a falling leaf came down to them. "No visitors!" "My liege," said Sir Percifer, "we are a questing party come from King Uther, and we seek to consult with your master Squirrelin." "No visitors!" "It is a matter of great importance." "No "We brought presents," yelled Uncle Patrick, interrupting the voice. There were several seconds of complete silence. Then, suddenly, a long rope uncoiled from the hole and came right down to them. Brutilda grunted appreciatively and started to climb the rope, with the princess still strapped to her back. Percifer gave Patrick an odd look. Patrick said, "You don't live in this city very long without learning how to bribe a doorman." Then he said to Joey, "Want me to carry you?" "No," said Joey, "I can make it." As scary as climbing a rope that high would be, Joey figured it would probably be even scarier to do so while being carried by someone else. The rope was longer than Joey had thought, probably about 30 or 40 feet, which seemed more like 300 feet to someone the size of a rat. But the climbing was easy, and Joey's little paws gripped the rope like it was made of chewed bubble gum. Being a rat had its advantages. Waiting at the top of the hole was a very old gray squirrel, very skinny with bare patches in his fur. "Is this Squirrelin?" asked Uncle Patrick. Sir Percifer shook his head and giggled and pointed toward a narrow tunnel that led to the tree's interior. They started to walk down the tunnel, but the old squirrel cleared his throat. "Oh, right," said Uncle Patrick, who dug into his fur and pulled out the last pepperoni rind he had left from the pizza parlor. "Sorry, it's all I've got." The doorman scowled, but he took the pepperoni. The tunnel was low and dark. Joey could smell acorns at the end of it, and something else. Something spicy, but also dirty and earthy, like a pepper that had been buried in mud. He came out of the tunnel and found himself in a circular room with a ceiling so high that he couldn't even see the top of it. Is the whole tree hollow? Stacked against the round walls, again higher than his eyes could see, were acorns. Acorns upon acorns upon acorns. "There must be millions," said Joey. "Enough to start a forest," said Uncle Patrick. Joey's stomach rumbled. He remembered how good the acorn back at the village had tasted. That seems like a year ago, he thought. The room was lit by a pale green agical flame that floated in the middle of the air. As Joey's eyes adjusted to the light, he could see that there were a few other things besides acorns here, mostly junk, littering the floor on the far side of the room. A ball of kite string, a pile of dirty rubber bands, some styrofoam peanuts, and a pink wax doll shaped like a squirrel. The doll was little, about Joey's size, and it looked even smaller because it was shaped like a starving squirrel. Joey could count the ribs carved into its sides. The toy maker hadn't even bothered to put any fur on it. It was altogether the strangest little toy Joey had ever seen, which was why it was especially strange when he saw it breathe. "Squirrelin, old fellow," said Percifer, walking up to the pink thing. "You look wonderful." Chapter 26. "No visitors," wheezed Squirrelin, for that is who the pink thing was. Joey couldn't have been more surprised if he'd seen a rock start talking or a cow jump over the moon. "We're not exactly visitors, your pinkness," continued Percifer, undeterred. "Call us emissaries from the court of King Uther. I'm Sir Percifer. You might remember I helped you fight off that possum invasion several summers ago." Squirrelin breathed out with a hiss, as if to acknowledge that he remembered. "Over there is stately, plump Brutilda. Those odd fellows next to her are Joey and Patrick. They can be explained later. And Sleeping Beauty on Brutilda's back is none other than Princess Yisleen, heir to the throne of Ravelon." The ancient squirrel cocked an eye at Yisleen without bothering to move his body. "This much I already know," he said. When he spoke, it sounded like the smallest whisper possible, but it somehow filled the whole room. "Oh," said Percifer. "Well, we come with news. I regret to inform you that your old friend and apprentice, Gondorf the Grey, is dead," hissed Squirrelin. "You think to inform me? I assure you, Sir Wisecrack, there's precious little occurring outside this tree that Squirrelin the Squigician doesn't already know about." "Then you know you have underwhelmers roaming your park." "Of course I do," growled Squirrelin. "They are here by my invitation. My plans for the wild ones are no concern of yours." "So you know they attacked us," said Percifer. "That's what wild ones do," said the squirrel. "I know you survived." "And you know why we're here," said Brutilda. Squirrelin nodded, almost imperceptibly. "A realm is under siege." He turned an eye toward Joey. "And a High Realmer boy wishes to regain his true form." Joey swallowed. You can change me back?" He was almost scared to hear the answer. Again, the squirrel nodded. "Come closer, boy." Joey shuffled close to the aged squirrel. From a foot away, Squirrelin was terrifying, but from an inch away, he was almost unbearable. This close up, the squirrel was undeniably alive. Little black pinpricks dotted his entire body where his fur used to be. His skin wasn't pink, it was clear and paper thin. Joey could see tiny purple blood vessels branching out and pulsing just under the skin, and a tiny heart just a little further under the surface beating. "Show it to me," hissed the squirrel. Joey was confused. Show what to him? "Hurry, hurry," said the squirrel scornfully, when Joey still didn't move. Squirrelin made an exasperated sound and said, "Ratscalibur, dunceling." So Joey pulled out Ratscalibur and held it up to the ancient wizard's beady eyes. Squirrelin sniffed the sword like he was smelling a flower and smiled. "So it's true. Fascinating. I haven't seen this weapon since young Axel visited me during the War of the Seven Fleas. The handle wasn't broken then, of course." Before Joey could move away, Squirrelin stuck his soft pink nose into Joey's furs and inhaled deeply. So deeply that his cheeks blew up a little bit, like a man blowing a trumpet. Joey was a little freaked out, but when Squirrelin let his breath out, he seemed satisfied. Yes, there is heroism here. Fascinating, fascinating. He cast an eye on Uncle Patrick, who stood protectively behind Joey, and that one too, but of a much more common sort. "So it's true," said Brutilda. "He's the hero we've been waiting for. The prophecy. It's a true prophecy and not just a nursery rhyme?" Squirrelin looked at Brutilda like she was an idiot. "Anything you say often becomes a true prophecy. That's how prophecy works." Joey was stunned. He really was a hero. Then why was changing back and going home the only thing he wanted to do? No, not yet. He had to know that his friends would be safe. Too many questions were whirling around in his mind. So, he asked the squirrel, you know all about Gondorf and the Black Claws and Salaman, right? Squirrel smiled and nodded. Joey continued, then, please, tell us what we should do. Squirrel stared at Joey with flat black eyes. Give me time, young one. I must think. Please, said Joey, I don't mean to rush you, but Salaman gave the kingdom a deadline of midnight tonight. After that, he'll send in the Black Claws, Brutilda grunted. And I need this to be over so I can turn back into myself, so I can go home. He heard a note of desperation in his voice. My mom is all alone. If I say you must wait, you must wait. But Squirrelin's eyes somehow turned blacker, like they could suck all the light from the room and out of Joey. Percifer stepped forward between Joey and the squigician. Of course, if you think waiting is best, it's best. Brutilda cleared her throat. While you consider our options, might I ask that you use some tiny part of your power to heal us, O squigician? We are sorely in need. Squirrelin didn't move, but he made a noise in the back of his throat that didn't sound like yes. We hate to trouble you, O wizened one, said Percifer, but we're in awfully poor condition. Just a little healing spell is all we ask. Squirrelin swiveled his eyes at Percifer again, but this time the knight didn't give up. Perhaps, he said, perhaps you could do it in memory of your beloved friend Gondorf. Squirrelin made the noise in the back of his throat again, but this time he wasn't saying no. Ah, poor Gondorf, it's the least I can do, I suppose. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath until his cheeks inflated again. But this time he didn't stop there. He kept inhaling, long after everyone else would have stopped. After his cheeks blew up, the air spread to the top of his head, then his neck, then his entire waxy skin inflated like a pink pufferfish or a paper balloon. He was now as round as an ostrich egg, but Joey could see his squirrel-shaped skeleton floating inside. It was like looking at an X-ray, just when Joey thought the old squirrel would pop like a chewing gum bubble. Squirrelin let out all his breath with a sudden hiss. And that's when Joey realized that he didn't hurt anymore. Joey looked around. All his friends were standing straighter. Their cuts and scars and scrapes were gone. Yasleen was yawning and opening her eyes. Squadgic, said Uncle Patrick, staring at the spearhead that had fallen from his suddenly healed side. Is powerful stuff. Not quite powerful enough, thought Joey. He'd just noticed that his tail hadn't grown back. Our cats could use some healing too, said Percifer. They're in our stables, in worse shape than we are. For Gondorf, said Joey quickly, before the squirrel could say no. Squirreling gave Joey a sharp look, but he blew himself up again, and when he let his breath out, Joey knew that Checkers and the other cats were feeling as good as he did. Now leave me, said the wizard. I really must think. Nutkin will show you a place where you can rest. The old doorman stepped out of the shadows and gestured toward another tunnel. May we have something to eat, said Patrick. We're half starved. Eat, said Squirrelin. It sounded like a rattlesnake rattling. Eat? Bad idea, Percifer whispered. I have no food to share. The pink thing's heart was suddenly beating a mile a minute through its skin. But, said Patrick, gesturing to the acorns that lined the walls, that is my winter store. Would you ask me to starve when the north wind blows and the snow falls on the park like white death? Uncle Patrick looked like he wanted to say something else, but Percifer whispered, that really isn't a question you want to answer. So Uncle Patrick just smiled and bowed to Squirrelin, who was turning an alarming shade of purple. Then turned to the old doorman and cried, Nutkin, lead the way. Chapter 27. Asking a squirrel to share food, said Percifer, is not a technique likely to end in much success. I know that now, said Uncle Patrick. Asking a squigician to share food, continued the white rat, as if Patrick hadn't said anything. That is a technique likely to end with your brains leaking out of your ears whilst you levitate above an active volcano. Yeah, I get it. Asking Squirrelin to share food. Will you shut up? So Percifer shut up, but he kept right on giggling. Hee hee hee. The room they were waiting in was small and dark. The floor was covered with rubber bands and styrofoam peanuts. "What's with all the junk on the floor?" Joey said. "Squirrel furniture," Brutilda sniffed. "They don't care what they sleep on as long as it's free." "Squirrel seems to be in good spirits," said Yasleen, who was fully awake now. "Really?" said Patrick. "He seemed kind of psycho to me." "Oh, he's like that," said Percifer. "Trust me, I've seen him when he's really grumpy. No, he seems better and stronger than I dare hope. He may be able to help us after all." "But will he help us?" asked Joey. "He seemed really reluctant to do that healing spell." "Oh, squirrels never do anything the first time you ask," said Yasleen. "Be careful when they do," said Percifer. Yasleen nodded. "The best news, I think, is that he's confirmed what I've known all along." She looked at Joey and smiled. That made Joey uncomfortable. Just because a squirrel says someone's a hero doesn't mean he's a hero. "Squirrelin would know," said Yasleen. Joey bristled. "Shouldn't I know?" Brutilda scoffed. "Forgive me if I trust Squirrelin's judgment over yours." "Yeah, but—" Uncle Patrick put his arm around Joey's shoulders. "Seems strange to me too, Honcho. But this whole situation's more than a little strange. Besides, why shouldn't you be a hero?" He squeezed Joey tight. You're kind of the best guy I know." That made Joey feel a little better. Yasleen scrunched up her face and rubbed her belly. "He could have spared us one acorn." "Now, Princess, you know better than that," said Brutilda. "My mind knows better. My stomach doesn't." Yasleen frowned and rubbed her belly again. Joey felt bad for her. Personally, he'd never been hungrier in his life, and he hadn't just woken up from a Ragic-induced nap. He couldn't imagine how hungry Yasleen must feel. "Let us hope we won't have to wait here long," said Percifer. Yasleen put on a brave smile. "Yes, I'm sure I can last a little while longer." Something about the way she smiled made Joey feel worse for her than ever. "I'll get you something to eat, Princess," he said, before he could stop himself. The princess smiled, but this time for real. "Oh, Joey, are you sure?" Joey couldn't back out now. Besides, if he was supposed to be a hero, he might as well start acting like one. "I'm sure. I can smell food hidden all over this tree." Uncle Patrick had a worried look on his face, but before he could say anything, Joey said, "I'll be fast. Squirrelin will never find out, I promise." Uncle Patrick still looked unconvinced, and Percifer said, "If you're caught, Squirrelin will be furious. It could jeopardize our whole mission." "I won't get caught," said Joey. "And anyway, he can't let the princess suffer." Uncle Patrick and Percifer looked at each other and nodded. "No, we can't do that," said Patrick. "But be careful." "I will," said Joey. The princess looked worried now. "Joey, I take it back. I'm not hungry. I command you to stay here." "Too late," said Joey, feeling almost heroic. He sniffed the air, and his nose instantly told him where to go. "There's a storeroom full of all kinds of food just down the hall a little bit. I'll be right back." The princess smiled at him again, and Joey hurried off out of the room, wondering if it was possible for him to blush through his fur. The tunnel was empty, except for more squirrel furniture strewn here and there. Apparently, Squirrelin didn't have a lot of servants or family living with him, maybe only Nutkin, and he seemed almost as old and crazy as the Squidgician himself. There was no light in the tunnel. Squirrelin probably didn't want to waste the Squadgic, so Joey was entirely reliant on his nose. He passed one room that was full of something that smelled foul even to him. Out of curiosity, he overcame his distaste and stuck his nose in the door for a better sniff. Bird droppings. The room was full of a mountain of bird droppings. Disgusting. Squirrels really would collect anything. The next room he passed smelled a lot better, but not like food. He looked in and saw huge piles of paper clips, bottle caps, handkerchiefs, shoelaces, and other treasures from the park outside. The next room was the one he was looking for. It was big, nearly as big as Squirrelin's acorn throne room. Only this room didn't just hold acorns. There were half-eaten Twinkies and dog biscuits and ham bones, olive pits and popcorn kernels, and watermelon seeds, potato chips and licorice whips and fish heads, all mushed together into a sea of supreme deliciousness. My goodness, Squirrelin is rich, thought Joey, and greedy. It suddenly struck him how ridiculous it was that the Squidgician wouldn't even spare one acorn. Joey felt like diving into the food and eating until he burst. But he was on a mission for the princess. His stomach would have to wait. He saw a pizza crust about halfway up the pile and, remembering Yaslene's fondness for such things, climbed up to get it. Allowing himself to nibble a corn chip as he did so. He was just grabbing the crust when he saw something at the very top of another nearby peak in the pile. Ooh, that looks yummy. He leaped over to the other pile, scrambled up to the top, and sure enough, it was a jelly bean. A green jelly bean. It seemed right to Joey that he should get to eat a green jelly bean here after almost dying trying to get one back at the village. He picked up the jelly bean and stared at it like it was a huge diamond, entranced by its beauty. He was so hungry that everything about it seemed perfect. Even the little flecks of mayonnaise on its bottom, the teeth marks where a human had bitten into it before spitting it out, the faint claw marks scratched across its surface, like a rat had tried to grab it, only to be pulled away from it at the last second. Joey wasn't hungry anymore, but he was very sure of one thing. This was the same jelly bean. Chapter 28. Joey ran into the room where the others were waiting, holding the jelly bean in his mouth. Yaslene's face lit up with a radiant smile. "Oh, Joey, I could eat it all in one gulp." "Not yet," said Joey, after he dropped it on the floor. "It's evidence." As quickly and as quietly as he could, he explained where he'd last seen this jelly bean. On a blanket, as part of the tribute which was taken away by the Black Claws. Percifer looked grim. "Are you sure, lad? Think. Are you really sure? Jelly beans do tend to look alike." Slowly Joey put his paw into the grooves on the jelly bean's surface. His claws fit perfectly. The room went silent. Joey wasn't sure for how long. It could have been just a second. It could have been hours. But he could feel the silence pressing in on him as everyone in the room realized what this meant. Uncle Patrick was having trouble puzzling it out. "I thought you said the Black Claws were taking the tribute back to Salaman." Joey nodded. "But if the tribute is here, that means that Squirrel is—" "Shh!" intoned Brutilda. "Don't say anything aloud that you don't have to." She looked around the room. Who knows what the wizard hears? Joey turned to Percifer and whispered, "You said Sala—" Here he cut himself off. "You said he was a magician." "We never saw him. We assumed he was, because he was so powerful." Percifer made a sad giggle. "Do you know that rats' secondary attribute after energy is arrogance?" Uncle Patrick looked at Joey. "I thought that sword of yours turned hot when you got around enemies. Shouldn't it have tipped you off about Squirrel?" Joey nodded. "I thought that at first too. Now I think it only gets hot when I'm about to be attacked." Percifer made a decision. "Princess," he said, "summon Sir Aramis." "He'll never get here in time to save us," said Yaslene. "If anyone can find a way, it's Aramis," said Percifer. "Even if he did get here, what could he do?" said Patrick. "We need to get out of here right now." "No," said Percifer. "What we need to do right now is think. We may be trapped in the lair of the world's most powerful worker of magic, whom we've just discovered is our mortal enemy." "Shh," shushed Brutilda. "But at least we now know what we know. And he doesn't know we know what we know now. So we have an advantage." "I can't tell if you're joking or being serious," said Uncle Patrick. "A little of both," said the white rat. "Hee hee hee." The giggle was music to Joey's ears. Maybe they still had a chance. Yaslene had been wiggling her fingers and whispering again. Now she opened her eyes. "I've sent the call to Sir Aramis." "Did he get the message?" asked Joey. "I have no idea," said Yaslene, looking annoyed. "Am I inside his brain?" "Oh," said Joey. Then he asked, "Are you mad at me?" "Yes," said Yaslene. "Why?" "You still haven't given me that jelly bean." He kicked it over to her, and she gleefully sank her teeth into it. She was licking her lips when Nutkin came into the room and dolefully announced, "The master will see you now." And that's where we're going to stop for today. I hope to see you next time. Bye.